So mostly it came about because doctors began to prefer it. So at the very beginning, for example, when I started in the 1980s, and I was not the first, there were people ahead of me, but I don't think any of us thought about the effects of the model on costs or quality or safety. We just were trying to find a model of practice that was more suitable for our clinical interests and our lifestyle. So it really began at the very beginning as a way of doctors just reorganizing how they work without a lot of thought about what might be the consequences of that for others in the healthcare system. I'll tell you a short anecdote that may be of interest. I've tried to find the first hospitalist group in the country, and it's hard to do, partly because there's not a standard definition of what makes one a hospitalist. But I've talked with lots of people, and the earliest hospitalist group I found was a group of pediatricians who really began a hospitalist model in 1968. And I talked about with them, why did you do that? That's a very long time ago. And the answer was they were pediatricians, and even in the 60s, pediatricians had very few patients in the hospital every day and lots of patients in the office. And this was a group of about 10 pediatricians. All 10 of them would go to the hospital in the morning. Each one would see 2, 3, 4 patients tops, and then they'd all dash back to the office. They'd almost cause a traffic jam with their cars coming in and out of the hospital. And they finally said, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Why do we all go back and forth like that? Why don't we have one of us stay in the hospital, and the rest will stay in the office? So they formed what might be the first hospitalist group in the U.S. And it wasn't because of somebody's management insight or thoughts about efficiency or costs or errors and safety. None of those things were anything someone was talking about way back then. All these other issues surfaced by the 90s and became a big part of the hospitalist movement, but it made it happen faster. It made the growth speed up a great deal. But it was already underway simply because of doctors trying to figure out the best way to organize themselves. The last thing I'll say in response to that is I assumed when I did medical training that everywhere in the world was organized reasonably similar to the U.S. That is, primary care physicians would see their patients in the office and in the hospital. And then was surprised to learn that, no, it's never really been that way in many countries. In many countries, they've had what you might call a hospitalist model for 75 years. Germany, England, some parts of Australia and Canada, and a few other countries I'm not remembering. Italy. Italy? Yeah, okay, that's right, Italy. Marco brought up Italy. They've always divided work separately among outpatient doctors and inpatient doctors. So it was just by chance that the U.S. did it differently and had the same doctor in both places. So it's a mistake to assume the starting point, for any healthcare system was a doctor seeing patients both in the office and the hospital. And so for many countries, the hospitalist model isn't really new. In fact, it's 75 years old in a manner of speaking. So anyway, I could talk all night about this stuff, but I don't want to keep you track.